The cry did not begin on social media. It did not begin in glamorous cities, and it did not begin with reporters or fans. It began in a quiet village, his village, where the air smelled of wood smoke every evening and the mountains stood like ancient guardians over the land. It began the moment the news arrived, carried on a trembling voice that barely survived the journey from mouth to ear. People who were present that afternoon say they felt the world change in the space of a single breath. Someone screamed. Someone collapsed. Someone whispered his name as if repeating it might bring him back. Within minutes, relatives, neighbors, and childhood friends stormed into the compound without being invited, because grief has no manners when it hits like a storm. No one cared about shoes, makeup, clothes, or pride. There was no dignity in the moment, only raw, naked pain. Elderly women beat their chests until their palms turned red. Men who had never cried in their adult lives found their faces wet and their voices cracking. Children huddled together, watching their world break without understanding the reasons. His mother's wail tore through the air like a blade. She held onto the doorframe, her knees threatening to give way with every breath. People tried to hold her, but she slipped through their arms like someone drowning in sorrow too deep to be rescued. She kept calling his name, each time softer, each time more broken, until her voice dissolved into sobs that shook her entire body. Inside the house, relatives sat on the floor in circles, their eyes swollen, their hands trembling. Every few minutes, someone would whisper something like, "Are we sure?" Or, "Maybe it's a mistake," clinging desperately to hope even though hope had already walked out of the room. A teenage cousin stood in the corner staring at the wall, whispering, "He promised to come home again, he promised." She repeated it like a prayer that refused to die. Outside, news spread like wildfire. Villagers left their farms early, abandoning tools beside half-filled baskets. Some rushed down the slopes barefoot, others ran across the fields calling out to neighbors. The whole landscape pulsed with confusion and disbelief. By evening, the road leading to his family home looked like a pilgrimage trail. People brought lanterns, mats, blankets, bottles of water, anything that might help the grieving family survive the night, although everyone knew nothing could soften a blow like this. Nothing. At sunset, the sky turned a deep orange, and birds returned to their nests with soft cries that seemed to echo the human weeping below. Someone lit the first candle, then another, and another. Soon, the entire courtyard glowed with tiny flames, trembling in the wind like fragile pieces of hope refusing to die. As the candles flickered, his old schoolteacher arrived, leaning heavily on a carved wooden cane. She sat in the corner, silent, staring at the ground. When someone asked her what she was thinking, she whispered, "He always sat in the front seat, always smiling, always respectful. He used to say he wanted to make the village proud." Her voice cracked, and she pressed the cane against her chest to steady herself. And he did. But now we must ask why the world could not protect him. A group of young men who grew up with him gathered near the mango tree. They spoke in hushed voices, their faces burning with anger and heartbreak. They remembered him as the boy who played football barefoot, outrunning everyone. The teenager who carried his grandfather on his back when the man was too weak to walk. The young man who left for the city with dreams shining in his eyes. They remembered how he always returned during festivals, laughing loudly, hugging everyone, giving children candy, talking about his next project, his next dream. One friend broke into tears mid-sentence. He wiped his face with shaky hands and whispered, "He told me life in the spotlight wasn't easy. He told me there were days he felt alone, even in a room full of people. But he never complained. Never. He said he just wanted to keep moving forward." Another friend clenched his fists and muttered, "But someone out there knows what happened to him that night. Someone knows the truth. And we won't let this silence swallow him." It was not just grief anymore. It was something heavier, something charged with suspicion, injustice, and a sense of betrayal. The more details people heard, the less sense anything made. Testimonies contradicting each other. Timelines shifting. Explanations too thin to hold the weight of reality. The The villagers were not experts in law or crime, but they knew when a story was incomplete. They knew when something smelled wrong. A woman who lived 2 houses away spoke up, her voice trembling. The last time he visited, he looked tired. Not physically tired, emotionally tired. I asked if he was okay, and he smiled that same smile he always used to cover pain. She wiped her eyes and added, "If he was suffering in silence, why didn't those around him see it? Why didn't they help him?" As night deepened, so did the questions. His uncle stepped forward and asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Where are the answers? Why is the story changing? Why is the truth so hard to find? His voice broke, but he pushed the words out anyway. This is not just a loss. This is a wound, and it will not heal until justice speaks. A sudden wind passed through the courtyard, rattling the leaves of the mango tree. A few candles went out. Someone relit them immediately. No one wanted darkness that night. Darkness already felt too close. By midnight, the courtyard was still full. People refused to go home. Their grief had knitted them together like threads in a single cloth, stronger together than apart. They sat shoulder to shoulder, listening to the stories being shared. Stories of his kindness, his ambition, his humility, his laughter, his sacrifices. Someone brought out a small portable speaker and played one of his interviews. His voice floated through the air, calm, warm, steady. People closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them like a blessing. Some smiled through their tears. Others covered their faces. A child tugged on his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Why does he sound alive if he is gone?" The mother had no answer. She pressed her forehead against the child's hair and whispered, "I don't know. I don't know." But even as they mourned, something powerful was awakening inside the village. Something fierce. Something determined. By dawn, their tears had transformed into a message that would travel far beyond the village, past mountains, past borders, past fear. The truth must come out. His hometown was no longer just a place on the map. It had become the beating heart of a rising storm. People from other villages began arriving. Journalists showed up with cameras. Fans sent messages from across the world. Strangers lit candles on their own streets. International voices began asking the same question the villagers asked. What really happened? And why is the truth hiding? As the days passed, the villagers organized vigils. They printed his photos. They marched from house to house, holding candles, chanting his name, demanding justice with a force that echoed through every corner of the land. Mothers carried babies on their backs as they marched. Elders raised their walking sticks in the air. Youths beat drums that echoed like war cries. The first part of the story had only touched the surface of what truly unfolded in those early hours. The moment the news struck, the village did not just mourn, they ruptured. Grief moved through the air like an explosion that no one could see, but everyone felt in their bones. This continuation dives deeper into those moments, the scenes, and the emotional fire that took hold long before the world even knew what had happened. It began with a single phone call, a call that froze the oldest woman in the compound where she stood, clutching her wrapper with trembling hands. Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Then she screamed his name with a voice that cracked through the village like thunder. The sound was so sharp that even chickens scattered. A neighbor rushed out, thinking someone had collapsed, only to find the old woman gripping the wall like it was the only thing keeping her from fainting. "Say it again," the neighbor whispered, terrified. But she couldn't. The old woman could only cry out a sound that wasn't even a word, just a cry so raw it made everyone nearby stop whatever they were doing. A young boy ran to the next house shouting, "Something has happened. Something bad." And within minutes, people poured out of their homes, drawn by instincts older than language. Humans know the sound of deep grief the same way birds know the storm is coming. Inside the family compound, a scene unfolded that would stay etched into the memory of every witness. His mother was on the floor. She had heard the news before anyone else. No warning, no preparation, just a sentence delivered like poison. "He is gone." She tried to stand, but her knees loosened beneath her, sending her crashing down. Relatives rushed toward her, but froze halfway when she let out the kind of scream that makes the earth tilt. It was a scream from the core of a mother's soul, a sound that felt older than time. She pressed her palms against the ground as if she could reach through the earth and pull him back. Her hair fell over her face, her shoulders shook violently, and her words came out in broken fragments. "My child, my son, not him, not like this." Her sisters held her, but she kept falling forward, wailing in a rhythm that matched the beating of her shattered heart. People outside could hear her from the road. Some covered their ears. Others covered their mouths. No one remained still. An elderly man, known for never crying, wiped his face over and over with his palm, confused by the wetness he felt there. He stared at the sky, as if asking God to return the world to the moment before the news arrived. A few steps away, his grandfather's closest friend, a man in his late 80s, sank onto a stool shaking his head, whispering, "Why did the world take him from us? Why?" The courtyard soon filled beyond capacity. Even people who barely knew the family came to stand in quiet solidarity. That is the way villages grieve, together like a single body breathing the same pain. Women rushed into the kitchen to prepare water for the fainting. Men arranged chairs even though most people were too broken to sit. Then came the children. They didn't understand the details, but they understood sadness. One girl, no older than 8, held a small candle without being asked. She stood quietly beside the door, her eyes wide, her face blank, trying to grasp why the adults she always saw as invincible were falling apart like broken clay pots. She whispered to another child, "Is he coming back?" The boy shook his head.
"No."
"How do you know?" she asked. "Because grown-ups don't cry like this unless someone is gone forever." That sentence hovered in the air like a ghost. Inside, his cousins huddled in a tight circle. One held his shirt, the last one he wore when he visited. She pressed it against her face, inhaling as if trying to find the last trace of a scent. Another cousin flipped through old photos on her phone, him smiling, standing by the river, chasing goats as a child, wearing a school uniform, laughing with friends. Then her hand froze on one photo, the last one they took together. Her breath caught and she whispered, "He's not supposed to be a memory." At that moment, the village chief arrived, wearing his traditional attire. He didn't announce himself. He simply walked into the courtyard and placed his hand on the mother's shoulder. She looked up at him with swollen eyes, and something passed between them, something too deep to translate into words. The chief went outside and addressed the crowd. His voice was steady but heavy. "This is not normal," he said. "This is not right." A murmur rippled through the people. "We must stand together. We must seek answers. Our son deserves the truth." Those words stirred the air. It was not just mourning anymore. It was awakening. Even the trees seemed to lean closer, listening. The candle flames flickered, as if bowing in agreement. A dog in the distance howled, a long, mournful sound that added to the atmosphere of the evening. By now, people had gathered in every corner of the compound. The sound of grief became a chorus, sobs, whispered prayers, gasps, murmurs of disbelief. The entire village felt like it was holding its breath. Then something unexpected happened. An older woman who had once been his neighbor started singing softly. Her voice quivered at first, but grew stronger with each line. It was a lullaby, one she used to sing for all the children when they were young. Before long, others joined in, singing through their tears. It was not a song of joy. It was a song of remembrance, a song of love, a song that said, "You mattered. You still matter." People cried harder, but it wasn't hopeless crying anymore. It was the kind that binds hearts together like threads sewn by grief. And in the soft glow of candlelight, in the trembling of that fragile chorus, something became clear. The village was no longer mourning alone. They were transforming their pain into strength. A spark had been lit. A movement had begun. A cry had risen from the earth, a cry the world would soon hear, whether it wanted to or not.